English Literature Revision for Power and Conflict Poetry, checking out my history. Okay, so first, some general advice. So don't focus on this is to teach yourself new material at this stage. Just use these videos and tools for revision. Use this time to revise and prepare revision material that will be useful in Year 11. So these may be revision cards or quotation cards, comparison materials as well you can produce. Try and set yourself 1 or 2 tasks that you can achieve and try and finish them. So that could be your individual quotations, a comparison essay, for example, trying to find quotations from memory or contextual research in memory. Try and set out tasks you can do and do them in full, so you can come back to them when you run exams. And finally, try a variety of different activities. So as well as your written materials, try and go through some Seneca learning tasks, SAM learning as well, in the following session. Okay, so you're making sort of several different routes into your revision materials. Okay, and once again, a reminder, so on the Pedmore shared area on the key drive, you can find in the Year 11 revision aids a lot of revision materials such as contextual information, articles. You can find PowerPoints to do with all the poems, and also you can also use SAM learning, Seneca learning, and BBC Bitesize, all very important and very useful online learning tools as well. So what you're going to do is choose one poem to focus on at a time. Make sure you're able to do the following. So briefly explain what the poem is about, link the poem to different themes and ideas, choose, annotate and learn 3 key quotations from each poem, and creating these into revision cards, coaching yourself in the wider reading, contextual information, and you can find resources online such as the British Library to build your background about the poet and what they've written. Okay, so on to here we go. Checking out my history by John Agard. What I'll do is read through the poem first of all, and then explore the language and do some annotation with you in the next couple of slides. Okay, so John Agard is from Guyana originally, so he's obviously someone who's foreign and he's studied British education system, and this poem is all about his experiences of learning about icons and stories rather than the icons of his own past, his own heritage. And the poem is all about how he responds to that and how he feels about that experience. Okay. Dem tell me, what dem want to tell me. Bandage up me eye with me own history, blind me to me own identity. Dem tell me about 1066 and all that. Dem tell me about Dick Whittington and he cat. But Toussaint Louverture, no dem never tell me about that. Toussaint, a slave with vision, licked back Napoleon battalion, and first black republic born, Toussaint de Thorn, to the French, Toussaint de beacon of the Haitian Revolution. Dem tell me about the man who discovered the balloon, and the cow who jumped over the moon. Dem tell me about the dish run away with the spoon, but dem never tell me about Nanny de Maroon. Nanny, seafar woman, of woman dream, fire woman struggle, hopeful stream to freedom river. Dem tell me about Lord Nelson and Waterloo, but dem the great Zulu. Dem tell me about Columbus and 1492, but what's happened to the Caribs and the Arawaks too. Dem tell me about Florence Nightingale and She Lamp, and how Robin Hood used to camp. Dem tell me about old King Cole was a merry old soul, but dem never tell me about Mary C. Cole. From Jamaica far to the Crimean War, she volunteered to go, and even when the British said no, she still braved the Russian snow. A healing star among the wounded, a yellow sunrise to the dying. Dem tell me, dem tell me what dem wants to tell me. But now I'm checking out my own history by carving out my identity. All right, so clearly a very distinctive poem in a lot of different ways. Initially, you look at the poem on the page and it looks different to any other poem in the anthology in terms of the way it's laid out. Okay, in terms of even something like the typeface, the fact we've got italics in there as well. It's a very fragmented structure, which is there for a reason, which we'll explore shortly. But going through the poem sort of chronologically, first of all, dem tell me, dem tell me. What we've got here, a lot of repetition of this phrase is so dem tell me is obviously a dialect. It's not what's known as a Creole dialect, dem tell me. That's the part John Agard is from, and it's the language which he's familiar with, okay, which obviously is there for a reason. Repetition of dem tell me throughout the poem. Okay, I'll highlight a few examples, right the way through to the end of the poem as well. There are more examples of this as well, obviously, but it's there repetitively. It's to reinforce the anger and the frustration, the certain version of history, but in actual fact he's got no choice over which version of history he really learns about. Okay, that's one of the common themes throughout the whole poem. And it's reinforced with this motif, dem tell me, dem tell me. And also it's got this twist to it, dem tell me, it's quite sharp, and it's got this sort of frustration and anger to it as well, which we'll touch back to later on. But very distinctive. Okay. So as you can see, very short stanza lengths. Going to the second one, we have bandage up my eye with my own history, blind me to my own identity. Very distinctive and powerful verbs here. Bandage up my eye with my own history, blind me to my own identity. Sort of covering someone's eyes possibly, okay? So that's obviously representing the idea of obscuring one's past. Okay, Agard wishes to learn about his figures and his past and his history, but is being prevented from doing so by these bandages. He's being blinded to his own identity. So we learn early on that identity is obviously a very key theme throughout the whole poem. So bandage, blind. The illustration there as well makes this even more memorable. And again, so we've got dem tell me, it's not my own history, it's me own history. Okay, so you get these sort of dialect in all the stanzas. Dem tell me about 66 and all that. Dem tell me about Dick Whittington and any cat. What we've got here, references to British things, for example, Battle of Hastings, 1066, and then Dick Whittington and any cats. So it's not like there's a reference to British or English figures, which John Agard, someone of his heritage and his background, would not know about or have any connection to. So it's nothing like this. He's only educated on things which he doesn't really have connection to. But Toussaint Louverture, no, they never tell me about that. So first reference here to something or someone that he would want to learn about, Toussaint Louverture. So a historical figure from outside of British shores, which he would kill. Not learning about that, he's frustrated once again. Them never to about that. And again, that a very emphatic use of his dialect there once again to finish that short stanza. And then we have a bit of a change of style, if you like. We have this longer stanza, although quite quick to get through as well. It's almost a song form. So Toussaint, a slave with a vision, look back, Napoleon, battalion. It's almost written to be as if it was performed. Okay, you can see it's mainly written in sort of rhyming couplets as well towards the end of the stanza as well. So we can see that it's got this rhythmical pattern which is very different to the rest. It feels much more free, which obviously is representative of the freedom and the constraint dichotomy from earlier on. Okay. Toussaint, a slave with vision, back Napoleon, battalion, and first back Republic born, Toussaint de Thorn to the French, Toussaint the beacon of the Haitian Revolution. Okay, he's idolising this figure, Toussaint Louverture, in this stanza. Rather than just mentioning someone, like actually expanding on Toussaint and who he was. In this case, metaphorically, he was a thorn in the side of the French. Okay, and he was a beacon of hope. So the beacon of the Haitian Revolution. He was a beacon of sort of rebellion and fighting back, of identity and having one's own sort of power individually. And then we're back into the familiar form of Manual 1. Don't tell me about the man who discovered the balloon and the cow who jumped over the moon. This time, what sort of comic book, not like Jump Over the Moon. And we've got someone here in the influential Toussaint Louverture, and he's juxtaposed with people who discover the balloon and the cow who jump over the moon. So while he's learning about the cow who jump over the moon, he sounds like something from a fairy tale. He's genuinely influential and important in forging his own heritage. Don't tell me about the dish, the spoon, but they'll never tell me about Nanny Dim. This stanza here, we've got couplets, haven't we? We've got the balloon, moon, spoon, maroon. He's making the language sound almost child. He's mocking the idea that the things he'd learn about are actually important. If it rhymes, it sounds like a fairy tale, it sounds childish. It sounds as though he's being forced into learning about things which are not important, that can be forgotten about. But then we get a reference at the end here. Again, this is where we get pointed towards another change of rhythm. Nanny de Maroon. And here, albeit a bit shorter this time, we have Nanny, seafar woman, of mountain dream, fire woman struggle, hopeful stream for freedom to freedom river. Here we can identify a couple of things. We've got a bit of a semantic field. Things which are natural, we've got fire, mountain, stream, river. Think about the connotations of mountain, the idea of a pinnacle or a peak. Stream, river, okay, they're all natural things with power, force, possibly even aggression. But they're things which we can aspire to, and that they can lead you to freedom, indeed freedom river. But also, taking it a step further, if you look at seafar woman, we can link back to the idea of being bandaged and blinded earlier on. We've got bandaged, blind, the idea of being obscured from your own past, from your own history. And Nanny is somebody who can relieve that sort of constraint. She can see far, indeed. And then if you want to take it a step further, you can see the beacon. Beacons are obviously used for sort of seeing across a dark space, almost like a lighthouse. So bandaged can actually be a beacon and make somebody see further than the words on a page. Okay, so these sort of more free stanzas, if you like, stanzas 4, 6 and 9 later on, actually gives a lot of language to do with freedom and seeing. Okay, back in. So we fall inevitably back into this idea of frustration and constraint. Don't tell me, don't tell me, tell me. Okay, so it seems like even reading through the poem, we can see Agard's point of view, the fact he's always having to fall back in line and see someone else's the true story, if you like. Don't tell me about Lord Nelson and Waterloo, but don't never tell me about Shaka the Great Zulu. So at this point in the poem, the reader knows what's going on. Okay, they know exactly what the poem is all about. And here Agard is just reinforcing the idea once again that he's being forced to love people and things which are not important to him. Okay, in actual fact, he asks a bit of a question as well. Albeit there's no question mark, and indeed very little punctuation in the poem at all. Don't tell me about Lord Nelson and Waterloo, but don't never tell me about Shaka the Great Zulu. Don't tell me about Columbus in 1492, obviously their discovery of America. But what happened to the Caribs and the Arawak? You may infer that there's no question mark there because, okay, he's asking a question, but maybe he's actually not able to ask a question because he would also be silenced and he's not able to question his own education or the teachers around him. Okay, so if you have a flashing thought of the Caribs and the Arabs able to actually, so it's very free flowing and he's not able to interrupt and interject his own questions. And then again, don't tell me about Florence Nightingale and She Lamp and how Robin Hood used to camp. Don't tell me about Old King Cole was a merry old song, but don't never tell me about Mary D. Cole. Interestingly, we've got Florence Nightingale who's juxtaposed here with Mary C. Cole, so you could say that they are sort of counterparts. If you research Mary C. Cole, you would notice that the stanza which follows, she was a nurse during the Crimean War, and she actually was a sort of how the nurse Florence Nightingale as well. Interestingly as well, before we go any further, Robin Hood as well. It's important to realise that Robin Hood is sort of hidden away towards the end of the poem here. Even among sort of British people or those in education, they might not see Robin Hood as important because he's not necessarily a factual character, if you like, who achieves certain things, like possibly or 1066. Robin Hood is much more of a mythical or a folkloric character. So even a British citizen who goes to school or house might question, well, why do we know about this character? Rather than someone like Mary Seacole, who's much, much more influential in terms of real life. Okay, second stage of the poem, the British reader, if you like, might start to question their own idea of what's important in their education. But going further on to Mary Seacole here. From Jamaica, she travelled far to the Crimean War. She volunteered to go, and even when the British said no, she still braved the Russian snow, a healing star among the wooded, a yellow sighing. Just want to draw your attention to a couple of the noun phrases here. So a healing star, for example, and a yellow sunrise. More of the natural features like the stream and the river earlier on. This time, semantically connected to light. Okay, the idea of light and seeing something. These figures again are lighting up Agard's sort of education. They're allowing him to see wisdom and knowledge and power and influence. Okay, healing star, yellow sunrise. Again, earlier on, he's being bewitched and blinded, but these figures are allowing him to see, allowing him to learn things which he wants to learn. And finally, into the last stanza here, dem tell me, what dem wants to tell me. Just to reiterate, dem to me, it's almost like doing by using this dialect, he's forcing us to see his perspective. Okay, we are learning about this sort of educational journey through his own voice. So in a way, it's quite ironic from a perspective point of view. We're seeing his perspective, whereas he's been forced to see our perspective all throughout life. So dem tell me, it's almost shoving it down our throat. He's making us aware of what his experience has really been like. And the repetition tells us that repetition of his education again. And finally, like carving out my identity. It obviously calls back to the title of the poem, looking at my own history, I carving out my identity. By checking here, because you could be checking in terms of sort of checking up on it or looking into it, making reference to it. But checking out could be checking out a library from a book, sort of connection there is almost, or inspecting in some way, inspecting it and maybe hoping to make changes to it, altering his own history possibly, and then carving, the idea earlier on, bandage up my eye with my own history, blind me to my identity, whereas here he's much more active, he's carving out the identity, he's acting upon the education which he's been deprived of. About the likes of Toussaint Maroon, Mary Seacole, he can actually carve out his own identity and his own version of history. Okay, so hopefully you'll be able to use the video so far and also your existing knowledge of this poem and be able to summarise what the poem is all about in full sentences. Okay, should be fairly simple to do that. And then following that, you can annotate the poem with points you can remember from your initial study and also any other responses you may have now after you've studied the poem once again. So the task to do following that would be to choose 3 or 4 quotations. I would suggest probably from the second stanza most of all, which you like the look of, and explode them. So again, the connotations of words such as carving, blind, bandaged, okay? Lots of different connotations which obviously may come from this video, also your own thoughts as well. We want to know your opinions and what you might think Agard was trying to do. And within those explosions, try and look at connotations and techniques such as metaphors, similes, alliteration, powerful verbs, personification possibly as well. And then also thinking about this poem's distinctive form and structure, thinking about why the stanza would have been structured a certain way. I like the idea of being fragmented, for example, and how Agard distincted education and his fragmented knowledge of his own history and heritage. That comes across on the page. So why might Agard have chosen to structure them in this way? Where's that and why? And what's the effect on the reader as well? To support your knowledge of the poem further, think about how you can use some contextual knowledge and how you can research this side of the poem as well. So where Agard came from, what time of his life did he write the poem? Was it reflective or was it at the time? Find out about what his motivations may have been for presenting the poem a certain way. Why is the poet focused on ideas? Why is the structure of the poem written the way it is? And the content of the poem, how is that reflected in the language and the structure as well? Okay. And then you can also look at the British Library online as well and just find any articles to back up your knowledge of the poem and the poet himself. You earn your AO3 marks along the way. Okay, and then connections to other poems. It's not just poem, but nonetheless, you can make lots of comparisons with the rest of the anthology. For example, you might look at the voice God expresses, very distinctive indeed. Well, there are other poems as well which have got a very distinctive voice. For example, Heritage Remains. The poem is written from the soldier's point of view. So the ideas of perspective there which can be compared. And the same goes for My Last Duchess, the dramatic monologue there, which has got obviously one voice and one voice only. It's on identity, the kamikaze and the traditions, and how identity can be tarnished or lost, and also the emigre, how identity can be sort of romanticized in certain ways as well. Okay, so if you to answer an exam question on checking out history, what we've got here is a question based on identity. Okay, so if you wanted to have a go at this question, for example, we'd recommend you spend and then write down your answer. Okay, what you'd be looking to do is look at anthology carefully, take your time with that, and think about the key word of the question. Which other poem speaks about identity? Well, for example, you could write out The Emigre or Kamikaze, or another one if you wish. You'd need to plan out by dividing your page into different ideas or points along with quotations. How is checking out history discussing the idea of identity? Well, it's obviously about history. One's connected to own value. Okay, for example, you could talk about Den Tell Me and that dialect and the figures from Agard's sort of heritage. Okay, once your plan is complete and you're happy with a few comparisons to make with another poem, you can then begin to write your introduction. The key thing with the introduction is focus on the key word of the question, identity. How it's presented, then you can get into your P paragraph. As ever, writing a P paragraph, make sure you use your P so that your paragraphs are sufficiently detailed. We recommend that while you're comparing and contrast with another poem, you alternate your paragraphs. So write one about checking out history and then one about your other poem, and vice versa. You keep alternating, so that ultimately you write 3 paragraphs about each poem with a total of 6 PA paragraphs. The more detailed your paragraphs are, the more chances you will have of getting into the upper bands of the mark scheme. When you finish your PA paragraphs, don't forget to round your response off with a conclusion which sums up the idea of identity and gives some sort of comments about the most effective bits. And to touch on the mark scheme here, we've got the keywords in each band. This is what your teachers and indeed the examiners will mark your work. Okay. Obviously the top band, looking for convincing critical analysis and exploration. When we say trying to look beyond just the words on the page and think about the motivations of the poet to use certain tactics and ideas and methods, and then obviously what their effects could be. So not only thinking about what words use alliteration or which metaphors, you're trying to think about why they're used and what the effect is. And obviously trying to think about the big picture about things like identity, heritage, frustration, anger with a poem like this. Every poem is being written onto a blank piece of paper and the poet has just expressed all their ideas in one go. Just think about why that has been done, why there's certain words being chosen, why it's done well. It's all done on purpose, there's no accident. Okay. Looking into these finer details and these layers of meaning will enable you to get to this level 6. And obviously level 5 as well, thoughtful, developed consideration. You're not just commenting on methods to explore the reasons behind certain word choices. Okay. So as long as you're writing in PA paragraphs and you're making comparisons, you should be able to, if you get to that stage, half marks, 15 marks out of 30, that's a pass. Okay. So writing in PA paragraphs is the key, making sure they're as detailed as possible, and you're making a comparison which is nice and balanced across the 2 poems. Okay, and obviously level 4, you can get into there as well with a clear understanding, just to explain exactly what the poet is trying to do. Okay, just a reminder again as well about the Pedmore shared area. So you can use the Q drive on the Pedmore shared area to get into the Year 10 home learning. There's obviously lots of different types of resources in there, for example, PowerPoints, revision materials, cards and so on, just to sort of reinforce your knowledge of all the poems. You've got SAM Learning, Seneca Learning and BBC Bite Size there as well, which you know about, and obviously a very useful resource online. And what you're expected to know is, regarding all 15 in the anthology, you should be able to briefly link the poem to different themes and ideas of crossology, choose, annotate and learn 3 key quotations at least from each poem, creating them into revision cards to come back to later on, and then to challenge wider reading such as the British Library and others as well, which will boost your contextual information. And finally, feel free to email your teacher at any time or anything you're not sure of relating to a certain poem, and also send any pictures of your work. So that could be revision resources, or if you want to email any responses that you've done as well. It's all about trying to create a good bank of revision materials that you can come back to in Year 11.